Ever stop to think about your favorite leather jacket, couch, or those boots you'd wear even in a desert storm? They're cool, stylish, and smell like sophistication, let's be honest. But where do they come from? Obviously not from a magical leather tree. Today, we're diving deep into the slightly gross, sometimes shocking, but always fascinating world of leather making in factories. This is a process full of wild twists, buckets of chemicals, and enough machinery to rival a sci-fi movie set. Stick around, because by the time we're done, you'll know so much about leather that you might just consider starting a leather trivia podcast. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe before we get started. Trust me, this is a video you'll want your friends to talk about. Leather's story starts in a pretty unassuming place, on the back of an animal. Yeah, your fancy leather couch, it used to moo. Most leather comes from cowhide, a byproduct of the meat industry. That's right, while one part of the cow ends up as steak, the hide is sent off to become fashion. It's efficient and practical, and a little strange when you think about it a little too much. But cows aren't the only contributors to the leather industry. Goats, pigs, and sheep also donate their hides to the cause. Each animal's hide has unique characteristics. Goat leather is softer and more pliable, often used in gloves and smaller accessories. Pig leather, with its unique texture, is valued for its durability, especially in shoes. And sheep leather? It's buttery soft, making it a favorite for high-end jackets. For the more exotic leathers, crocodile is revered for its luxurious scales, while snakeskin offers a dramatic, sleek look. Ostrich leather, with its distinctive bumps, scream high-end and is often a staple in luxury wallets and handbags. But before these hides become the iconic pieces we adore, they embark on a meticulous journey through the factory. Once the hides are removed, they're treated with salt to preserve them. Ever wondered how long a salted hide can last before it starts to decompose? And what happens if this step is skipped? This stops bacteria from turning the hides into a smelly science experiment. Imagine giant warehouses filled with salty cowhides, stacked like pancakes. Delicious? No. Necessary? Absolutely. Beyond cows, did you know that some of the rarest leathers come from surprising sources like stingrays? Their hides are prized for their unique pebble-like texture and incredible durability, often used for high-end wallets and belts. Even fish skins like salmon and perch are making a splash in the leather world, especially among eco-conscious designers looking to minimize waste. Oh, and here's the mind bender. In some parts of the world, leather has been made from vegetables. Pinatex, for example, is derived from pineapple leaves. While not leather in the traditional sense, it's a sustainable alternative that mimics the texture and durability of the real deal. Imagine trading your leather couch for a pineapple leaf one. I mean, talk about tropical vibes. When the salted hides arrive at the factory, it's time for a deep cleaning session. The hides are first soaked in enormous vats of water to remove all the dirt, salt, and grime that's built up during transportation. Think of it as giving the hides a long overdue bath, because no one wants dirt-covered leather. Next comes liming. And this is where things get intense. The hides are dunked into a chemical bath of lime and sodium sulfide to remove the hair and any remaining tissue. Basically, the leather equivalent of a chemical peel, but for cows. But here's where things get even more intense. The chemical bath not only removes hair, but also opens up the hide's fibers, making it more receptive to the tanning agents later. Afterward, the fleshing machines, which are equipped with razor-sharp blades, meticulously scrape away any lingering tissue or fat. Imagine a giant robotic chef preparing a hide for a Michelin-starred recipe. It's both bizarre and fascinating. By the end of this step, the hide is completely bare, like a blank canvas, ready for its artistic transformation. If the hide could talk, it'd probably be screaming, "Where's my moisturizer?" After liming, the hides go through fleshing, where machines scrape off any leftover fat or flesh. At this stage, what's left is essentially just raw skin, ready for the real transformation. It might not look like much yet, but trust, this is where things get exciting. Let's zoom in on the fleshing process. This part is as industrial as it gets. Massive steel rollers, armed with razor-sharp blades, remove every last speck of flesh from the hide. Think of it as a cowhide's extreme exfoliation session, but instead of leaving it smooth and glowing, it looks more like a soggy, pale sheet of raw material. And then there's the deliming, the part where factories neutralize the alkaline residues left from liming. This stage uses special acids to balance the pH, making the hides soft and pliable before they're ready for tanning. If chemistry isn't your thing, just imagine the hides going through a chemical detox retreat to prepare for their transformation. Tanning is where the magic, or depending on your perspective, the mayhem happens. Without tanning, the hide would eventually rot, and no one wants a leather bag with a shelf life. This stage is all about stabilizing the material and turning it into the durable, flexible leather we all know and love. There are two main ways factories tan hides: vegetable tanning and chrome tanning. Which tanning process creates leather that's so durable it can last over 100 years? And why does chrome tanning dominate the modern industry despite its controversies? Vegetable tanning is the more traditional method. It uses tannins extracted from tree bark, leaves, and other plant materials. The hides are soaked in these natural tannins for weeks or even months. The result, a sturdy leather with a rich, earthy color and that unmistakable leather smell. It's eco-friendly, but time-consuming. So if you've ever wondered why some leather goods cost a small fortune, this is part of the answer. On the other hand, chrome tanning is the modern speed demon of the leather world. It uses chromium salts to tan hides in just a few days, creating softer and more pliable leather. The hides are tossed into massive rotating drums, which are giant machines that look like they belong in a car wash, and spun with water, chemicals, and chrome. It's fast, efficient, and makes up about 90% of global leather production. When it comes to vegetable tanning, there's an intricate science to how tannins interact with collagen fibers in the hide. Tannins essentially lock the fibers in place, preventing decomposition. What's wild is that the longer the hide stays in the tannin bath, the stronger and more water resistant it becomes. Some traditional tanneries, like those in Italy or Morocco, use century-old wooden vats that still contain traces of tannins from decades ago. It's like aging wine, but, for leather. Chrome tanning, by contrast, is less poetic and more practical. Ever wondered why it's so fast? Well, chromium salts penetrate the hide quickly because they bind with the collagen at a molecular level, creating a tight, stable structure. This process doesn't just make leather durable, it also makes it lighter and stretchier. That's why your favorite sneakers or car seats are probably chrome tanned. Here's a fun fact to drop at your next dinner party. Chrome tanned leather often has a slight bluish tint before it's dyed. So if you ever see blue leather, don't panic, it hasn't been smurfified. Once hides are tanned, it's time to give them some personality. At this stage, the leather is still pretty plain, kind of like an unpainted canvas. Factories use dyes, oils, and finishes to transform this blank slate into the sleek, polished material we recognize. The hides are dunked into dye baths or sprayed with color to create a wide range of shades. Traditional browns and blacks dominate the leather world, but modern factories can create just about any color you can imagine. Want a hot pink leather jacket? They got you covered. How do factories achieve those vibrant colors without the leather, losing its natural texture? And what's the weirdest color of leather ever made? Well, after dyeing, the leather is treated with oils and waxes to make it soft and supple. This process also helps to waterproof the leather, making it more durable. Finally, the hides go through finishing, where they're polished, embossed, or even given a glossy top coat. Those patent leather shoes that look so shiny, well, they owe their glow to a synthetic coating applied during this stage. Let's talk color. Ever wonder why certain leather products have such rich, vibrant hues? Factories don't just rely on dyes. They layer the colors in stages. First, there's aniline dyeing, which sinks deep into the hide for a translucent, natural look. Then comes pigmented dyeing, where a solid layer of color is applied to the surface. This is what gives your leather goods their uniform, polished finish. And those fancy embossed designs on luxury leather, they're created using heavy-duty rollers engraved with intricate patterns. Whether it's a crocodile texture or a diamond quilted pattern, the embossing process is where art meets engineering. Here's some fun information. Patent leather, the shiny stuff used in dress shoes, gets its high gloss from layers of polyurethane. It's essentially the leather version of a top coat for nails. No wonder it looks so sleek. Alright, here comes the dirty tricks. There are many types of grades of leather, and it's important that customers are able to discern the difference to avoid being scammed. Full grain means that you get all of the grain from the hide, and it's the top grade. It's made from the outer layer of the hide, with all the natural flaws, the marks, the folds, and everything. Sturdily built and getting better with time, this kind of leather gains a unique patina as it wears on. In fact, that patina is what leather enthusiasts go crazy for. It's like a storybook written into the material. A full-grain leather wallet, for instance, might start off stiff and unremarkable, but gradually becomes buttery smooth, with darker, richer tones for daily use. It's the ultimate if these walls could talk scenario, but for your accessories. Contrast that with top-grain leather, which sacrifices this natural aging for a more uniform appearance. Top-grain leather is a step below. Factories polish the surface to make it better by sanding off the imperfection, but this makes it slightly weaker. Nevertheless, it still finds usage in bags and furniture and many more items. Then there's genuine leather. Don't be fooled by the name. This is one of the worst kinds of leather you can get. It's created from the residual bits of plywood that are then laminated and painted to mimic the real product. It's similar in concept to the hot dog of the leather of the world. It's leather, but it's not the best of the best by far. But who doesn't like hot dogs? It seems no business of manufacturing leather products is complete without differing terminologies like full grain, top grain, genuine leather, and now bonded leather. This is not real leather. It's actually made from ground up leather offcuts and plastic, then compressed into sheets. Franken leather, to me, is the more realistic form to the industry. If your leather office chairs crackles and peels after 5 years, then it's most probable that you have bonded leather on your hands. A relatively newest member in the hierarchy is the corrected grain leather. Major flaws are sanded and rounded off on the hide while sanding and brushing to give a fake stamp of full grain. In between genuine leather, it's cheaper than full grain but more durable than genuine leather. You catch my drift? Here's the twist. Many brands slap genuine leather on their products to make them sound high-end, but in reality, it's just a clever marketing ploy. So the next time you see a product boasting 100% genuine leather, you'll know what's up. Did you know leather isn't just for fashion? It's gone to space. Yeah, NASA uses leather in some of its astronaut gloves because of its durability and ability to withstand extreme conditions. Well, let's address the elephant in the room, the environmental impact that comes with using leather. Tanning also involves a lot of chemical work, and particularly chrome tanning leads to formation of huge volumes of effluents. While some factories have installed efficient central recycling systems to deal with this, others are recklessly disposing of the waste into rivers and undoing the good work of planting trees. However, there is what people may call environmentally friendly leather. Vegetable tanning is returning in fashion, and a couple of brands are starting to use artificial leather made from the lab. Who knows? Someday soon, your leather jacket could be printed cruelty-free and sustainable. There are more issues than mere wastewater that affect the leather industry. The process of tanning involves more than 250 chemical compounds, and they include arsenic, cyanide, as well as formaldehyde. Some end up in landfills or in rivers, which can cause long-term problems for ecosystems. To prevent this, countries such as Germany and Sweden have set strict regulatory measures that require the factories to develop closed-loop systems to recycle water and chemicals. Another question is carbon emissions. Contained in the specification are the economic activities of rearing animals for their skin, tanning of the skin, the transportation of the hides, and the final leather products, all major players in the release of greenhouse gases. Some are trying to overcome this by sourcing hides for leather from those animals that have been slaughtered for their meat so that all parts can be utilized. From biker jackets to luxury handbags, leather isn't just a material, it's a cultural phenomenon. It symbolizes rebellion, sophistication, and craftsmanship all at once. And the industry, it's worth a jaw-dropping $400 billion globally. That's a whole lot of cowhide. Leather's impact on culture is profound. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs wore leather sandals as status symbol, while Roman soldiers carried leather shields into battle. In medieval times, hardened leather was used as armor because it was light, flexible, and resistant to sword slashes. Knights would often wear leather breastplates under their chainmail for added protection. Fast forward to the 20th century, and leather became the uniform of rebellion. Think Marlon Brando in The Wild One, or James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. Today, leather transcends trends, symbolizing everything from rugged masculinity to high-end luxury. Fun fact, in medieval times, leather-bound books were a status symbol as well. If your library was full of leather books, you were basically the Elon Musk of the 15th century. Some exotic leather items like Hermes crocodile skin Birkin bags can sell over $500,000. That's more than the cost of a luxury car, and it's just a purse. So there you have it, the full story of how pure leather is made. It's messy, chemical-filled, and occasionally bizarre, but it's also a fascinating blend of tradition and innovation. The next time you slip on your leather shoes or lounge on your leather couch, take a moment to appreciate the wild journey that brought it to you. And hey, if you learned something new today, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this video with a friend who loves leather, or someone who just needs to know where their boots really came from. So see you in the next video, and until then, stay curious, stay stylish, and maybe don't sniff your leather bag too hard in public.